Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Michael Morales of Terrible Parlays. Jack Slack, it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following UFC 322, bangers almost all the way up, and 1172, which is still ongoing at the time of starting recording. I'm dipping in and out of it. Yuki Yoza's just beaten Superlek, which is huge. And Eubank versus Ben 2-4, whatever that is. But I haven't watched that yet. But it's my job to touch in and talk to you about the fights that happened. Well, mainly UFC fights that happened. So, got some pretty good stuff on this card, actually. Thing you can't get around. Main event, blown away by Islam Makhachev. I've been saying for a while he's like one of the most skilled fighters I've ever seen. And the move up to welterweight is a big one because like a lot of the time he is seen as in Khabib's shadow. And I think now what we're going to remember Khabib for more is like the potential of going on an all-time great run as opposed to actually doing it, because Islam Makhachev's done the step up. Khabib was always talking about stepping up to welterweight and he never did. And Islam did it and he looked phenomenal. This is also quite nice because I feel like there was too much bollocks about the undefeated record. Islam Makhachev is easily the best fighter out of that camp now, even though his cousin... Umar lost to Merab, didn't he? But like the undefeated record was being like heralded as the most important thing, and it just isn't. But this was a good fight, because if you know anything about Jack Della Maddalena, you know he's a good fighter. If you'd seen him fight before on the ground, you know he's a tricky fighter. And one of the reasons that this impressed me more than the Chimaev-Duplessis fight is that Duplessis resigned himself to bottom position a lot of the time and then just sort of held Khamzat to him. And then Khamzat didn't really try and strike. So aside from the moment at the start of the round where he had to get the takedown, it was just sort of cruising to a decision. I know a lot of people looked at this and saw lay and pray, but if you actually look at what's going on, it's pretty impressive. So in the very first round, Makhachev gets him down. Della Maddalena gets a cross grip and starts hitting a cross wrist stand up or a cross grip stand up from low knee shield. Makhachev starts pushing him back into the ground. Della Maddalena rolls onto his back and rolls Makhachev over the top of him. Makhachev stays on the body lock, does like a headstand into a cartwheel, and then ends up on his back behind him. And then rides him out for the rest of the round. And the whole fight was full of these little bits of Jack Della Maddalena doing things that have got him up against very good fighters. And Islam Makhachev not being like, I'm so heavy, that doesn't work, but actually doing things to address that. There's this idea from a wrestling coach called Ray Carson, who wrote a few books about wrestling back in the day, that I find really interesting. But he had this whole thing called counter control, which is if someone grabs something, you do something to make that grip not work anymore. Whether it's removing the grip, whether it's doing something to neutralize the grip. So if someone gets like an underhook, you can physically take an underhook out. You can post your head underneath theirs. You can drop your hips back and start pulling the elbow down over the top of the underhook. Or you can like drop your weight on the underhook and make it so that the underhook is more of a burden to keep. And then, of course, even turn it into your own offense. But if you haven't read the article I wrote before this fight, I should have plugged this at the start, but there was 4,000 words I did on not just like their styles, but interesting things about them that I thought were going to run head to head. Jack Della Maddalena, when he's on the bottom, he does not play guard. He's very good at getting the octopus underhook, which is where you like get your elbow in underneath their armpit and swim it up their back, and you get up on your other hand and you start sitting up. And Craig Jones is very big on this too, but the octopus is a very interesting position because it's known as octopus guard, but you can get the same upper body sort of positions from guard and side control, bottom. And from side control, it gives you this ability to roll to your knees into what's called like a cat dog position and start wrestling up, or at least put the guy on your front headlock, which is what Jack Della Maddalena did to Gilbert Burns over and over again. Got cradled a couple of times in that fight, but he did it to Hafez. Anytime he's on the bottom, he does the octopus, he starts getting up, and they grab his head. And when they grab your head, your legs are free to start powering you up to the feet. You know, a standing front headlock is not a super powerful position in MMA. Whereas if you want to play half guard or whatever, and you're like, I'm staying safe, your legs are locked in underneath the guy. You aren't getting up. So one of the really interesting things in this fight, I wrote that because I was like, I think it's going to match up interestingly. A guy who loves giving up the front headlock to get up going against a guy who has really made a specialty of the front headlock in his last couple of fights, really looking for that DAS at all costs, the short arm DAS. So that was part of it, but then also the number of times Islam Makhachev walks himself back from side control into half guard, because it makes it hard to get up. It makes the octopus harder to use. If you watch when Della Maddalena comes up on the octopus underhook, he even got up to his elbow sometimes. Makhachev is in top half guard, and he's got the sole of his foot pressed on Jack Della Madalena's thigh, and he's pinched him in, and he can't get any height. He's just like stuck. It's almost like he's in sort of a half mount. So that was really interesting to see. And then also all the pulling out the elbow on the bottom arm, which is most positions where you have to sit up from half guard. If you pull out their bottom elbow, it's very powerful. Randy Couture and Neil Melanson used to call it putting them on the low shoulder. Like, it's a lot harder to work your way up if you're on your shoulder than if you're on your elbow. And it's a lot easier if you're on your hand. This fight, for all the technical nuance, it demonstrated a really important principle, that is, if someone wants to get up, they normally, unless they're going to do like a kip up, they have to get on one side. They have to put one hand or elbow or shoulder on the floor, and then they have to lift their bottom leg out and put it behind them. They have what's called a heisting leg. So if you control the elbow and you don't let them come up to it, that's one way of keeping someone down. And if you control the leg by sitting in half guard, you don't give them the heist leg to get up. And all the, advanced techers and in the moment instinctual feeling stuff that Makhachev did in this fight basically adhered to those sort of two rules. DAS defense was, of course, on point from Della Maddalena, because obviously that's the one thing you got to worry about if you're giving up the front headlock all the time and you're fighting a guy famous for his DAS. But he did a great job of just generally like punching both arms through and going flat back to the mat if the DAS came close. That was one of the things where I was like, Makhachev looks huge. He looks completely reasonably sized for a welterweight, and Della Maddalena is not significantly taller than him. I think they're about the same height, or it's like 1 inch taller, Jack Della Maddalena. But when you're dealing with bigger men, it is a lot harder to do that sort of reach through and crumple them in for the DAS from half guard, just because they're bigger and stronger. The striking stuff was short-lived but very important, I thought, because we watched Makhachev have a lot of trouble with Dustin Poirier on the feet, doing a lot of jab and dip, which is jab and then change levels, preemptively. In boxing, it's because when you jab, there's immediately going to be something coming back. So you jab and dip and you throw another punch afterwards from your new position, and you've basically worked your way into offensive counterpunching. But in MMA, if you jab and dip, you change level immediately after punching to meet their reactive double or their reactive shot. All the easiest and best takedowns that happen in MMA, even by the best wrestlers, happen underneath punches for the most part, because that's the time when the guy is completely exposed. And it was intriguing that even Dustin Poirier is not noted for his great takedown defense. If he got in position, or rather if he had dropped into position and then Makhachev shot, he had a really good chance of getting out. But in this fight, something that Makhachev didn't do against Dustin Poirier, against a fellow southpaw, has a very good kicking game. It's his left leg, and because he's always fighting orthodox opponents, it's to the body and the head. Doesn't really go to low kicks. Jack Della Maddalena comes out southpaw. Makhachev immediately hammers him with 2 kicks to the leg. And already Jack Della Maddalena looked like he hated that. Just such a lovely weapon from close stance. I suppose it's really basic shit, but the reason it's so important is that it does change fights. And if you're not doing it, you don't benefit from it. I did a big bit on the double collar tie in that article, and you did see Makhachev try and grab it a few times. I liked that Della Maddalena just kept swinging on the body from there, because I think that's just a good answer generally to the double collar tie in MMA. However, we just watched Beneil Dariush. I suppose this will be my whole breakdown of that fight, but Beneil Dariush came in massively overweight. We were talking before this fight about like how his chin sort of vanished, but then sort of came back, and then he was looking good against Benoit Saint-Denis. Landed a couple of good low kicks, threw some punches, landed another good low kick, knocked him off his feet, moved in, grabbed the double collar tie, and Benoit Saint-Denis just kept swinging and knocked him out from a position of like really bad positional disadvantage. But I mean, that's fighting. Like, you can be the best technician in the world and your opponent can be the worst, but you still can't avoid taking some blows at some point. So the durability waning there's just no way around it, really. And as always, before this fight, I was talking about how, like, I really was sad that Beneil Dariush's career sort of fell apart just before he got a title shot at Islam Makhachev, because his fellow southpaw, which is something Makhachev doesn't see a lot, and he has like an 83% takedown defense rate. Not over like a few fights, but over something like 20-something fights in the UFC against all manner of wrestlers. But it seems like he just can't take the shots anymore. But anyway, yeah, double collar tie was interesting in this fight. Didn't play out that extensively on the feet. Really, that low kick was like the be-all and end-all on the feet. And then Della Maddalena did try to push him back from the get-go. And you saw as those kicks started landing and as the takedowns started resulting in a whole round of top control, Della Maddalena wasn't able to push him back in the same way. I do find it very interesting about Islam Makhachev. His takedowns are kind of the wrong way around. Most people in an in a closed stance matchup, so orthodox versus orthodox or southpaw versus southpaw, where you're both in the same stance, most people will shoot the double with their head outside of the lead leg. And if they meet someone in an open stance, which is southpaw versus orthodox or orthodox versus southpaw, they'll shoot the single with their head on the inside and pick up just the lead leg because it's more accessible. Makhachev, if you watched his fight with Poirier, after he sort of gave up on reactive doubles, he's shooting these long reaches, two-handed reach shot for a snatch single, basically, as he steps in against a fellow southpaw. And then against Della Maddalena, when Della Maddalena is southpaw and they're in a closed stance, he goes for the snatch singles. Like the first one was great, picked up the leg, pummeled himself inside of it, which a lot of the time people will look to put their leg on the outside when they're defending a single. But he slid back a little bit, put the leg on the outside of him, and then clubbed the head and swept the foot, which was gorgeous. The man has just so much technical variety. It's fantastic. But when Della Maddalena was orthodox, he brought his head across to the outside and shot the double the opposite way to the way most people would do it. So that was really interesting. Obviously, very impressive showing from Islam Makhachev. I think there's a lot of interesting matchups there at 170 for him. In fact, 170 is a pretty exciting division. However, Makhachev and Ilia Topuria seem to be moving their way outside of sort of the general structure of divisions, which sucks for everyone else in the divisions that they're going to hold up. But I suspect the next 170 fight for Islam Makhachev is going to be against the 145, now 155 pound Ilia Topuria. Or maybe they make Makhachev come back down to 155, but that'd be a lot. I mean, I just can't see them doing a catch weight fight when there's so much belt stuff going on. But that being said, they made both of them drop their belts to go up and get another belt. So even though Makhachev was out there posing with two belts, not technically a double champ in the way that guys previously have been, but it's always nice to see someone doing all they can to screw some more money out of the UFC. Squeeze some blood from that stone. There was a brawl afterwards. My thoughts on that are, that's cringe. Dylan Dennis was involved, and to be honest, if you say a word about it, you're doing his job. You know, you're playing into his grift. He is a blue check in real life, and rent's due. So what else happened on this card? I think I'll save my incredibly in-depth, detailed thoughts on the co-main event for the Patreon episode. So if you're really interested in what I have to say about Valentina Shevchenko, if you want to check that I'm saying the right things, sign up to the Patreon. But I love what they did with welterweight on this card. They had two contender fights at welterweight on the same card as the title fight, which seems like such an easy thing to do, but a lot of the time they don't bother doing it. The one I always give it an example of, Habib Conor happened. They had Tony Ferguson on the main card fighting Anthony Pettis. And that's obviously didn't come together because that was a cursed fight, but that's what you want to be doing. You want to have people see someone who's going to be relevant to the main event. They had Habib on a McGregor card, but that was the one in New York. That was the Alvarez one. I think he was on the undercard, and it's like, no, try and put them less than 2 hours before the main event so that people actually see it. But the main card of this, like during the sales pitch on the undercard, Rogan and DC were saying every fighter on the main card is ranked. And I saw someone say, yeah, dog, that's what it should be. It's a pay-per-view. But when you see it like that, you go, wow, there are almost 200 ranked fighters in the UFC. And when you just put ranked fighters, you know, get 10 of them, put together a main card, it just comes off so strong compared to most of the shit we get most of the time. Michael Morales versus Sean Brady. I think in a card where my reads were all over the place, this was a quite good read because I just said Michael Morales is not a slick striker, and I don't think I have to convince you that he's not. But he serves a fascinating role as the anti-wrestler with massive heavy hands. If he's forced to stand with a better striker, I imagine he'll have a horrible time because he's got big loopy punches. He's got a nice jab, but mainly against guys like Sean Brady, who, you saw Sean Brady get absolutely paralyzed when he couldn't get Bilal down, and Bilal just 1-2'd him to death. I don't think he ever got to a position where he could like parry or slip a jab from Bilal. And Bilal's not got like magic hands. He's got respectable hands. But the Sean Brady thing is if the shot doesn't work, he's in trouble. And this one, he only even went for one shot, which is a bit, not ideal. However, if you watch the way that Morales fights, he was basically in a wrestling stance the entire time. His hands, he's got fists, but they're in front of his chest, super low. His hips are back. His stance is squatted down. His head's forward. He's basically ready to wrestle. And this makes a great comparison with Makhachev, who opened the card. And Makhachev, I'm always going, what the fuck is he doing here? He can't do MMA. Makhachev walked towards Camilo in the first round, late in the first round, and he had his gloves up by his chin, and he was standing upright. And Camilo changed levels onto his hips, and you watched it play out as he just bundled Makhachev over. But you're going, what was the physical defense there? It's not about having levels to your takedown defense. It's hand, head, hips. If you don't have your hands ready to deal with the takedown, if you don't have your legs bent ready to throw your hips back or push your hips into them and feed them the single, if you're not ready to change levels to meet them, you're going to have a horrible fucking time. With Morales, Sean Brady could look at him and go, it's going to be really hard to shoot on him because his hips are back, his head's low, his hands are low, his knees are bent. He's basically like he was completely disregarding the threat of striking from Sean Brady. But he was making the educated gamble that he wanted to defend the takedown. That was his primary focus. And we said coming into this fight, I looked up his stats, 89% takedown defense in the UFC for Michael Morales. Now, not fought the best grapplers in the world or the best takedown artists in the world. But when you add this one, that's not good. And Sean Brady only attempted one takedown, but I think that tells you more about how uncomfortable he felt shooting on Michael Morales. What I did like from Brady was that if you got someone in a long, low stance like that, kick their lead leg. Because to stand up and check, you have to be in quite an upright stance to do it efficiently. The longer the stance gets, the more the spread the feet get, the lower the stance gets. All that stuff makes it easier to hack away at the legs. And their response is to try and like time you with the right hand. But they're probably going to take the kick every time. And if you kick hard enough, you'll buckle their knee in. There's a great fight back in the day between Igor Vovchanchin, MMA legend, and Ernesto Hoost. And Vovchanchin was like a kickboxer succeeding in MMA when that was unheard of almost, and knocking everyone out. Goes into the ring with Ernesto Hoost, and he's like, no, you can't stand like that against Ernesto Hoost because he's going to chop your leg up. You might be able to run through and bundle him over one time when he kicks you in the leg, but it's kickboxing. You're going to get stood back up, and he's going to go right back to kicking your leg. I think Sean Brady made himself an educated assessment that he's not particularly worried about getting taken down by Morales, so he started going to the low kicks. And I thought that was a good shout. Morales' jab was long and strong and down to get the friction on. But his jab looked great. I mean, he's got a colossal reach, and he's a tall welterweight. So the fact that he jabs well is basically, it's not a must, but it is really good to have that build and be able to jab well. His other striking is comical. Like, if you watch when he jabs, his right hand winds up behind him like a Bugs Bunny uppercut. He shifts on almost all his punches. He runs towards the guy. It's kind of like Sergey Pav. You found out you can hit really hard. You've got this ability to stop people taking you down. You don't particularly need the educated jab and the setups and the feints if you can just panic them by stopping their shot and run in on them swinging. Be very interested to see him against someone like a Prates, maybe Bonfim. I was so impressed with Bonfim versus Randy Brown. Randy Brown would be a really interesting ask of him because, it's another... Well, Randy Brown's like 6'4", so he'd be towering over him. But luckily, he's not going to have to fight Randy Brown because Randy Brown, out of the rankings, mate. And Michael Morales in the ascendancy. Who's ranked above him? Gary, I suppose... With Gary, it's the rounded threat that makes him sort of unique. You could maybe include Bilal, but Bilal's striking is. I don't think he'll be. I don't think he'll be focusing on it too much in future fights because of how the Jack Della Maddalena fight played out. But above him in the rankings, it's Buckley, real low accuracy swinger. Gary, decently rounded guy. Usman and Edwards, both well-rounded fighters, but ghosts of who they were. Shavkat, again, more a grappler than a striker, but a decent striker. Brady, almost entirely a grappler. I imagine he won't be ranked above him for long. Bilal, JDM, Islam. So yeah, he won't have to face any tall, difficult strikers anytime soon, probably. I do think he's colossal compared to Islam Makhachev, but I don't think Islam Makhachev's game falls apart if you can stop the takedowns for a bit. Islam Makhachev has a kicking game. He has a striking game. He has ways to chain one into the other, striking and wrestling. Sean Brady doesn't have that for the most part, with the exception of the awesome level change feint he did against Jake Matthews that made Jake Matthews sprawl onto his hands and knees, and Brady was already swinging punches on him. That was cool. But this is a huge win for Michael Morales because Brady was he was in the ascendancy. We were all ready for him to get a title shot at whoever. We are also sort of waiting for Shavkat to come back because he's supposed to have done enough, but then he blew out his knee or whatever, and he's been off for, I feel like 10 years at this point. But Prates versus Morales would be a very interesting matchup. But obviously, I say they wouldn't do it, but they're both on the same time scale now. You'll see guys fight on the same card and then fight on the same card again because if they didn't get injured, that's going to be when they're coming around to being ready to fight again. Carlos Prates versus Leon Edwards. I thought this was a spectacular performance. A little bit more of sort of like Leon looking like he's lost it and probably not getting it back. This weight class has been home to some of the great fall-offs. Hendricks probably the worst. Well, maybe Woodley. Both guys looked like they were in the running for like all-timers briefly and then just fell off a cliff. Usman has that fight with Hamzat that sort of saves him, but he's not doing well. Oh, he just beat Buckley, didn't he? But he's on a 1-3 run, and Ali Abdelaziz is trying to get him a title fight with Islam at the White House. It's the dumbest shit. Because they're both his clients. But in the Prates Edwards fight, you saw Edwards trying to use his wrestling. I mean, shooting takedowns, which is not something that Edwards typically does. But then when you've got a guy like Prates who there's been someone just recently showing you the clear path to victory. Didn't hate what Leon was doing. He looked a bit slow and a little bit skittish. But man, the knockout, he got caught switching to orthodox. He only occasionally switches to orthodox in his fights, and he always looks worse there. He always looks like it's not very well practiced. Goes backwards, trying to do sort of like a long guard, and the left straight came straight down the middle. Caught him right on the point of the chin, knocked him stiff. Like with a lot of Leon Edwards fights, there's going to be, even while the commentators were telling us that he never quits and he never gives up on himself, there was sort of like in the Brady fight where he was clearly just like, I don't like this. But good for Prates. Again, another fight that makes Ian Gary look better. And I hate to say this because he's a bit of a knob, but that Ian Gary performance against Prates was very impressive. Managed to use his wrestling, but also strike decently while managing the danger against an extremely explosive opponent. El Flaco Explosivo, the explosive thin man. It always makes me laugh when you see training footage of people like Prates and Cerrone, guys who are gigantic at their weight class, and then you see them with other people who are 6 foot, and they're just a skinny beanpole. Tommy Hearns, another hilarious one. But then Hearns went all the way up to like light heavyweight, not boxing light heavyweight, not MMA light heavyweight, but still, he got a good bit bulkier by the end. With Brady, it is funny that he came out a few weeks ago and was like, I've only got like 4 more fights before I retire. And it's like, bro, the UFC are not going to put you in a title fight now. In a division because it's going to take a long time to find a clear number 1 contender in that division when there's a good number of guys and a number of them have beaten each other. We're going to get Ilia Topuria come up, fight at welterweight at like 165 pounds and then never fight another welterweight. It's going to be mental. What else happened? Benoit Saint-Denis versus Beneil Dariush, we already talked about. Bo Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira. I mean, this was the softest ball they could throw Bo Nickel. A guy who relies on being on top but doesn't have very good takedowns and has dog shit striking. It's like, Bo, please throw some overhands at this lad. And then he finally got him in the third round with a high kick. But, you know, who's impressed here? And then the other middleweight slop match was Robocop versus Roman Kopylov. This one really did actually surprise me in a number of ways. I thought Rodriguez would walk him down, beat him up, mix in the takedowns. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. He walked him down and he beat him up for the most part, but he could not get Kopylov off his feet. At one point he picked up a single and Kopylov got the whizzer, kicked it through, threw him with a Haragoshi. And I just went, what the fuck? Where did that come from? Now Kopylov pretty decisively lost this fight. In the third round he finally turned it on a little bit. Hit Rodriguez with the strangest sort of half-assed Superman punch I've ever seen that wobbled him. But he had like 2 good connections in the entire round. He just didn't turn it on much, even when he turned it on. But I'll be honest, I came in expecting Gregory Rodriguez to win. And I left being like, that could be one of those things are getting better, but it's not showing in the record yet type results. You know, it takes time to fix these holes. And the hole of Kopilov's wrestling, Kopilov's hole has been gaping for years. The whole of Kopilov's wrestling has been costing him fights since, you know, he arrived in the UFC and was held down by Duraev. But if he genuinely can now fight off takedowns well with a bit of urgency and even threaten to throw people on their head, that would be amazing. Robocop is no slouch in the wrestling. I do think back to those fights in Fight Nights Global, where he was fighting title fights. And guys were trying to wrestle him because it was a Russian promotion, but he was lasting until the 4th round and knocking him out there. And I do wonder if being a 3-round fighter in the UFC, because he's not ever going to be the biggest star on the card, and he's not ever going to be the best ranked fighter on the card, I wonder if that hurts him because his gas tank isn't bad, and if he sort of outlasts these people, he can put them away late. You know, a 4th round here, maybe he finally would have turned it on, but as it was, he didn't. And, you know, you can't rely on having 5 rounds. Unless you're literally holding the belt. You could either be, I mean, the level for being a headliner at the Apex is so low that basically anyone could be it in the UFC. But they can always swoop in with a better fight than you and just put that at the top for some reason. So definitely can't rely on having 20 minutes to tire the guy out. Erin Blanchfield versus Tracy Cortez was bleh. You know, it was 2 flyweight women whose main thing is wrestling or grappling, trying to box, which was bad to watch. But then in the second round, Erin Blanchfield decided to try a takedown, and she hit that gorgeous inside trip that she has. It's like her and Henry Cejudo. Only people really rock in that trip anymore. Actually, Volk does from time to time along the cage. But Cortez jumped up. She chased her down with a double leg, locked hands under the butt, and she ended up, like Tracy Cortez came up holding a leg, and she ended up falling on a crucifix. And she did something that Barrett Yoshida used to do, who was very famous for using the crucifix in grappling. He would get the crucifix, which is your legs around one of their arms, you behind them, and then he would like either convince the opponent to step over his legs and pretzel themselves up more, or he'd push his feet through between their legs. But either way, it locks you down in a really annoying way. And she was able to get the rear naked choke from the crucifix, which you don't see very often. And then the surprise one, I said on the Boycast, I checked out Ethan Ewing's last fight in anticipation of this, because he took the fight on 2 days' notice against Malcolm Wellmaker. And Malcolm Wellmaker's had some matchmaking that's like, let's make this guy look good. He's a little bit O'Malley-esque in that way. But Ethan Ewing came in and he just looked like the complete package. You know, he didn't look like a super physical talent. He just, when you were watching him, you know, he's clinching up when he wants to clinch up. He's breaking from clinches on his terms and hitting on the break. He's attacking in combination. He's working the body. He's going 1-2, move your head, 1-2. You know, he's putting together combinations in combination, which is, I mean, that's how Kyle Dorcas almost immediately stunned Gerald Meerschaert. You don't have to throw a 5-punch combination. You have to throw a 3-punch combination and a 2-punch combination, or a 2-punch combination and a 3-punch combination. That's how you get your volume up and start to overwhelm people. And volume was the name of the game here, because Wellmaker would land a good southpaw right hook counter from time to time, which he seemed to bring in from outside the cage, where he loaded it up. And Ewing would go, ouch, and then get back to work with like 3 punches, immediately outscoring him after that exchange and saying, look, I'm doing all the work. I don't think Wellmaker looked bad here. I just think Ewing did enough to win by doing lots. Both Ewing and Michael Morales actually used the Leon Edwards move, which Leon Edwards wasn't using on this card because Leon Edwards was the guy pursuing the clinches. But get your head underneath the opponents when they clinch and they've got an underhook. Get your head underneath theirs, get your hips back, stretch that underhook out, and start beating them up off it. Knees to the body and then elbows on the break. And both Ewing and Morales were looking for those and doing really good work. If you can trap a guy there and just pound the body with knees and punches, it's a really powerful position. Go watch Gunnar Nelson he gets the underhook on Leon Edwards, and Leon Edwards head posts and puts his hips back, and Gunny's trying to like walk into him sideways. He's got he's got an underhook, but his elbow's against his own body. He's got nothing to lift with. He's not compromising Edwards in any way, and he's just getting kneed in the body as he does it. Or the Cerrone fight. But yeah, that was cool to see from Ewing. He was using it to free his hands and hit, which I love. That's how you're going to do body work in MMA. If you want to punch the body in MMA and you want to do body-body head combinations, you want to be Mike Tyson, get the clinch first, put your head under theirs, free your hands, start punching. Dorcas Darst Meerschaert, which was cool. Pat Sabatini held down Chepe Mariscal for a lot of the fight. The takedowns were good, and Chepe Mariscal's scrambling was pretty good, so it wasn't terribly boring, even though Pat Sabatini... He did land a good elbow, actually. I was going to say, generally, his ground and pound isn't anything to write home about. And he does look petrified of standing at any point in the fight. But great showing for him, because Mariscal was going from strength to strength since the Morgan Charrier fight. I was very excited for him. And Sabatini showed exactly why he's so difficult. You could knock him out immediately, like Diego Lopez did. But if he can start wrestling at any point, he's a nightmare. And the broomstick he was using in this fight, that's where you're in the back. You got your hands locked around their waist from behind them. You put your leg in front of one of their legs and behind the crook of the knee of the other one. And you use that as a lever to like trip them over. But there's a really nice one that he did in this fight that you see in collegiate wrestling quite a lot, which is you use that, but then you jump up and your other foot, the sole of the foot, hits their other ankle, so they can't step back with either leg. And you just fall on top of them. In the collegiate wrestling, there's a guy who's so good at it, he basically falls into mount on people. And it's basically an instant pin. Can't remember his name. I'm going to have to go check the old... Might have been a DPS breakdown, might have been a Earn Your Gold medal. And that was about it for good stuff. I'm going to go and watch the one card, and then I'm going to watch Eubank versus Ben. And I'll be back later in the week to chat about that. Might write an article if anything was good. And then... next weekend, we've got a surprisingly decent card. I mean, it's December. They do normally try in December. And we had that dead spot the last couple of weeks. But Sarukian versus Hooker. That is Sarukian completing his UFC-mandated community service. Bilal Muhammad versus Ian Gary, which I didn't even know was happening until I said it. Oral Buy's back. Ooh, Alex Perez versus Almabayev. That's good. Oh my God, Kyoji Horiguchi versus Ulumbekov is hidden in there. I'm not confident even picking Kyoji nowadays. He's a bit past it, but man, this is a solid card. Why are they trying so hard? Oh, they're in Qatar. That's why. Oh, oil money. That's why. Looking forward to it. So sign up to the Patreon if you haven't read the article from pre-fight. It's still good. And I'll catch you later in the week. Cheers. Finding out that when you make your UFC debut, the cringe-ass Crypto.com shirt has a debut patch on it to make you look even lamer. Bless.